Chapter 461. Orissa widened her eyes in shock, and her mind went blank when she looked at the handsome face before her eyes. Benjamin only let go of her when she started to blush uncontrollably. He then threw another glance at her reddened cheeks. Now, that's more like her. The next moment, he held her chin so that she would look at him. Orissa, I was talking to you. What happened to your ears? Didn't you hear me? Benjamin gritted his teeth in anger. Wah, what did you say to me? Orissa regained her composure and tried to push him away. However, Benjamin held her so tight that she couldn't even move a muscle. The atmosphere surrounding the two seemed a little romantic. Benjamin leaned forward once more, and Orissa instinctively tried to shy away from him. However, she was pinned against the wall, and she had nowhere to hide. Benjamin glared at her and reprimanded, I said the kid is fine. What are you still so sad about? Orissa stared blankly at him because she was astounded by his tone. I'm being serious here. What's with your expression? Since the kid is fine, why do you look so devastated? Don't you want to find him? Benjamin was so loud that he was practically shouting at her. In utter shock, Orissa grabbed Benjamin's shirt emotionally and asked, are you serious? She was so emotional that her voice was trembling. Benjamin's rage immediately dampened when he saw her teary eyes. Yes, I'm serious. I've found him. Orissa's eyes immediately brightened up, and she asked anxiously, where is he, then? Did you bring him back? No, I didn't. Benjamin pursed his lips. Why? Orissa glared at him. Getting no response from him, she frowned and became skeptical. Did you say that just to comfort Ma? Darn it. Benjamin grumbled and leaned forward to bite her lips. In pain, Orissa shoved him aside instantly. She then wiped the corner of her mouth and noticed that she was bleeding. Are you crazy? I think you're the one who's crazy. Benjamin's expression turned gloomy. I told you the kid is fine, and you thought I was just comforting you. Do I need to do that? Orissa acknowledged how pissed he was, but she wasn't annoyed by it at all. Instead, she was elated because of the child. He's okay, and he's alive. Where is he? Orissa looked at him in anticipation. Benjamin shot her a glare before he turned around and left. He's at the place you were at before. The place I was at. Where? Orissa chased after him and questioned, tell me where. Benjamin turned around and gazed at her stomach. Didn't you say you needed to use the restroom? Orissa suddenly remembered that she needed to relieve herself. Wansha saw Benjamin walking away without the intention of revealing more. She went ahead and used the restroom. In no time, she came out and saw Benjamin eating on the couch. She went to him and sat down without thinking about whether Shaw might anger him. Benjamin, where is he? Tell me now. Finish your oatmeal porridge first. Benjamin answered without sparing her a glance. At the same time, he was eating oatmeal porridge as well. Orissa was stunned momentarily before noticing a bowl of oatmeal porridge on the coffee table. Just then, the aroma of the oatmeal porridge wafted over to her, and her stomach started rumbling. She then gazed at the calm and collected man next to her. It seems like he's not going to tell me anything if I don't eat. With that thought in her mind, her heart started racing. Is he worried about me? Can't you just tell me first? Orissa pouted and grumbled before eating a spoonful of the oatmeal porridge. Benjamin glanced at her from the corners of his eyes and teased, what if you faint again when you hear it? You are such a hassle. Orissa froze, and she pursed her lips when she heard Benjamin teasing about her being weak. I've only fainted because I didn't sleep well, and I've received some bad news. Why would I faint again now when I'm going to hear some good news? Just tell me. My appetite will get better if my mood is lifted, no. Orissa moved closer toward Benjamin and stared at his handsome face. She was eager to know everything about her son. Has he been well? How did you find him? Why didn't you bring him back? Is it because he didn't want to come with you? Chapter 462. Must she talk like her son? What makes her so certain that I wasn't able to bring Tim back? Benjamin scoffed inwardly before shoving Orissa a spoonful of oatmeal porridge. Orissa widened her eyes in consternation. On the other hand, there was a hint of amusement in Benjamin's eyes. Eat first, okay, I've already found him, why are you so anxious? Hearing that, Orissa sighed. As she was chewing on the oatmeal porridge in her mouth, she realized that he'd fed her using his own spoon. She instantly blushed when she saw him not minding it. Hearing no response from her, Benjamin turned to look at her. His gaze darkened when he saw her eating the oatmeal porridge with her head lowered. She's so mesmerizing when she blushes. He's all right, just eat your oatmeal porridge, he urged. Although Tim has grown up with a poor family, he's still healthy. Once we've gotten him home and fed him well, he's going to be as strong as Jesse in no time. Orissa merely shot him a glance before finishing her oatmeal porridge hastily. Seeing that, Benjamin pursed his lips and whipped out his phone to send Ethan a text message. Soon, Ethan had replied with a photo of Tim. Benjamin could finally breathe a sigh of relief when he saw Tim all freshened up and wearing a set of new clothes. I'm done. Orissa had gobbled down 2 bowls of oatmeal porridge. She then glanced at Benjamin earnestly. Benjamin swallowed the food in his mouth and put his bowl aside before handing his phone over to her. Orissa glanced at him with a confused look. Benjamin tilted his chin and gestured for her to look at the phone. The child. Orissa took the phone and stared at the screen with her eyes widened. She was overjoyed. After a close look, she asked, "Why is he so tanned and skinny?" "He looks like a little Coleman." Benjamin cast a glance at her and answered, "Why do you think?" "He grew up in a village." Orissa nodded. "Well, that makes sense." She then gently touched the photo of Tim on the screen of the phone. She was utterly heartbroken when she saw how skinny and frail he was. Those dark circles under his eyes are so apparent. His life must have been tough. Orissa exclaimed. With me, Zachary and the others had never starved even one day in their lives. How could my son be so skinny? Benjamin looked at her and comforted her. The most important thing is that he's healthy. We'll get him fed when he comes home with us. Orissa was over the moon when she heard him saying that her son was healthy. At least he still has fully functional limbs. That's a blessing. We should count ourselves lucky knowing that he was never involved in unlawful acts. How did you find him? She asked. Seeing how anxious she was, Benjamin explained slowly, I looked into the leads from the time Donna brought Gavin to me. However, I found out that the child was dumped in a garbage bin. Benjamin paused and gazed at Orissa. Okay, although she looks a bit grim, she's still calm. Seeing that she didn't act out, he relaxed a little. He then continued, I was afraid that you might find out about it and get depressed, so I got Ethan to bury the leads. Right then, Orissa glared at Benjamin and questioned, and you said you had nothing to do with that. Benjamin gulped and replied, I didn't want you to get sad. Orissa pursed her lips. Then, how did you find the child? Benjamin continued telling her about everything that had happened after that. When Ethan was on his way back here, he received a phone call. At first, he thought it was just a scam, so he wasn't bothered by it. However, he received another phone call when he was in the study room. They told him the child was at their house, and he started bargaining with Ethan. I then heard a familiar voice from the phone call and started thinking if they were telling the truth. After that, I got Ethan to track the caller's location. Coincidentally, the caller was in a village that you've visited before, Rudasii Village. I suddenly noticed that the voice belonged to the village chief. Hence, I brought Ethan and the others to rush over. At that moment, Orissa's heart was pounding erratically against her ribcage. I was so close to my son then. Her heart broke when she remembered the time when she saw a bunch of kids playing around with their mothers. Could my son have been one of them? Chapter 463. Did you manage to find him when you got there? Orissa glanced at him. Benjamin shook his head. It was already past midnight when we got to the village. The village chief led us to their house, but they weren't there. We were told that they'd gone to town. When we got to the town, we still couldn't find them. In the end, it was a nurse from a clinic that told Ethan. Clinic. Has he fallen sick? Distress was written all over Orissa's face. Benjamin furrowed his brows and uttered, Don't interrupt me when I talk. Oh, okay. Orissa pursed her lips and looked at Benjamin worriedly. Benjamin threw her a glance and continued, He isn't sick, but the old lady who adopted him, Madame Mary is. Is it serious? Orissa couldn't help but ask. Since Madame Mary is my son's savior, she's also our savior. Nothing bad should happen to her. Benjamin looked at her and answered, "It's complicated. I've already sent Sean there, and we'll only know more once he has checked her. In the end, we found the child at a hospital in the town of Northstream. Tim is quite a smart boy. He managed to avoid us a few times because he thought we were the bad guys. When he saw the bodyguards in the hospital, he took Madame Mary to the restroom to hide from us." Hearing that, Orissa felt like she was on an emotional roller coaster. However, she was very happy to learn about how smart her son was. "Even I would be scared when I see your bodyguards, let alone a child. How would he know if you guys were the bad guys or not when he saw the whole bunch of you walking in?" Orissa uttered. Benjamin's lips twitched when he heard that. "Why didn't you bring him back, then? Did he not want to come here?" Orissa gazed at Benjamin and questioned. Benjamin gazed back at her and answered, "When we found him, Madame Mary had fallen sick. At that time, she was vomiting blood, and she was still inside the emergency room. I think he's too worried about Mary, so he didn't come back with me." Curious, Orissa queried, "Why didn't you wait for her to come out? How is she now? Under such circumstances, isn't it safe to say that a normal human wouldn't have left? Besides, he just found his son. For the child, Benjamin was nothing more than a stranger he'd just met. Madame Mary is fine at the moment." Benjamin ignored her first question. Orissa sized him up a bit and thought about the reasons why he was there with her. Right then, her eyes lit up. "Did you rush back here because I was hospitalized?" she asked softly. In response, Benjamin merely shot her a glare and kept mum. As Orissa was looking at the prideful man before her eyes, she couldn't help but feel warmth welling up in her heart. "I'm perfectly fine. It was just my anemia acting up. You should have stayed there instead," she said in a gentle tone. Benjamin fixed his gaze on her and answered with a deep voice, "You weren't listening to a word I said on the phone. If I didn't come here and explain it to you, you'd surely still be sad by now." Hearing that, Orissa shrunk in her seat and remained silent. Initially, she thought Benjamin was just comforting her with his words. Besides, she wasn't going to trust him because she thought he could still be protecting Donna. Now that Benjamin had explained himself, she couldn't help but feel like an idiot. "What an idiot," Benjamin scolded. Orissa widened her eyes in anger. Although he had a point, she was still displeased at having been called an idiot. "You didn't make it clear. Was I not clear?" Benjamin's expression turned gloomy, and he closed in on her. Orissa leaned back and looked at Benjamin warily. Upon seeing how submissive she was, Benjamin thought it would be fun to tease her there and then. Hence, he leaned in closer. Seeing that, Orissa anxiously backed away once more. Again, Benjamin moved toward her. "What are you trying to do?" Orissa reached out her hand and pressed it against his chest. Suddenly, Benjamin leaned into her. Orissa was stunned. "Hey, you, what's with me?" Benjamin stared at her seductively. By then, Orissa was nearly engulfed by his deep and dark eyes. Benjamin was so close to her that she could smell his scent, and she instantly blushed upon taking a whiff. "You're so heavy. Get off me, Graham." Chapter 464. "I want to go and see my son. Now that I know where he is, I don't want to waste another minute here." Benjamin eyed Orissa as though he could see right through her. "You can't go anywhere before you get better. He is so bossy." The corner of Orissa's lips twitched before she rebuked, "I'm fine." "You're fine. Are you saying that fainting is something common for you?" Benjamin scoffed. Orissa was rendered speechless at his remark. "Well, it's the truth. I wasn't like this before." He rose to his feet and called for a doctor to come in. Orissa shot Benjamin a curious glance, and before long a doctor arrived. Benjamin requested the doctor to examine her condition. "Mr. Graham, Miss York has recovered. Are you sure you have done a thorough checkup?" Benjamin narrowed his eyes at the doctor with a sharp and compelling gaze. The doctor was taken aback by Benjamin's question. "Even though I'm not as good as Sean, I'm certainly not a quack." I'll examine her again. I might have overlooked something." Under Benjamin's watchful eyes, the doctor couldn't stand the pressure and conducted another round of examinations on Orissa. Orissa trained her gaze on Benjamin for a while. I finally understood why he called the doctor. She let out a resigned sigh at the thought. There's no need to do another examination, doctor. I'm fine. No, it's best if you have one. Don't ever underestimate anemia, Miss York. Please try to have sufficient rest and don't stay up late, the doctor advised while checking her. Give her another booster shot, Benjamin demanded. Orissa was upset. Benjamin, are you crazy? I'm all good now, so why do I need another shot? Shouldn't you have another one for your weak, fragile body that faints easily? The kids had no idea that you were in the hospital. Don't you think they will worry if they knew? Orissa was stunned that the usually quiet man could say so much in one go. Can you give her another shot? Benjamin asked the doctor. The doctor was baffled at the request but obliged in the end. Sure, give her one then. Orissa was rendered speechless again at their exchange. The doctor quickly left the room to make the necessary preparations. Can I take a rain check for the extra shot? I want to see my son, Orissa asked. No, you can't. Benjamin turned on his heel and walked toward the couch and sat on it. Orissa pouted for a while, then stomped toward the door. Before her foot could step out, the bodyguards were already there, blocking her path. Move, Orissa glared at the bodyguards. Please go back in, Miss York. Don't make this difficult for us. 10 bodyguards were blocking the door to prevent Orissa from leaving. Knowing there was no way she could escape from 10 burly men, Orissa whirled around and strode toward Benjamin instead. What do you think you're doing? I'm all better now, so why can't I leave the hospital? Stop bothering me, Benjamin admonished before returning his attention to his work. He had pushed a lot of work aside when he spent the entire night searching for his son, then spent the day at the hospital. Orissa was beyond upset and infuriated. I can't leave through the door, and the only other exit is the window. I can't jump from the window. With a glance at the window, she noticed they were at least 10 floors above ground. Following the direction of her gaze, Benjamin's eyes glinted knowingly. What, are you thinking of jumping? Orissa scowled at him. Why would I? She turned around and climbed into bed, reaching for her phone to make a call to Bradley. Bradley, we've found him. He's at a hospital in North Stream. Can you visit him for me? I can't go yet. Benjamin's expression turned dark at her getting help from another man. You can ask Ethan if you want to know about the kids. He is with him. Orissa finally glanced at Benjamin, meeting his furious gaze, then quickly looked away. I haven't even gotten angry yet, so why has he lost it? On second thought, since he cared about me and worried that there might be a relapse, I'll let him off just this once. When can I leave, Benjamin? She set the phone down, preparing to have an intense debate with him. Benjamin didn't spare her a glance and merely continued working. Chapter 465. Hey, pissed at his ignorance, Orissa glowered at Benjamin. Keep it down. Benjamin tilted his head slightly and speared her with a sharp gaze. The corner of Orissa's lips twitched again. Benjamin, you're restricting my freedom right now. Yet, Benjamin continued to play deaf and focused on his work. Running out of options, Orissa plopped onto the bed, fuming. Suddenly, a thought flashed across her mind. Weirdly, the kids haven't called me. Checking her call history, she noticed a missed call from Gavin earlier when she got in trouble in the morning. She returned the call but Gavin's phone was turned off. Orissa dialed Zachary's number next but got the same result. Why are their phones turned off? She immediately tried calling Oliver, Jasper, and Jesse, but their phones were turned off as well. Orissa frowned with concern. Just as she was about to ask Benjamin, the doctor returned, and she swallowed her burning question. There's no need for me to take this shot, right, doctor? Orissa tried to discuss her options again with the doctor. Miss York, you must take it for your health, the doctor advised, then peered at Benjamin. Otherwise, Mr. Graham will be worried. Couldn't come up with any other excuse, Orissa conceded and lay down for a shot. Benjamin's gaze swung to her briefly before returning to his work at hand. Ouch! Orissa yelped when the needle pierced through her skin. Benjamin frowned and glared at the doctor. Couldn't you be gentler? Feeling more pressure, the doctor apologized instantly. I'm sorry, Mr. Graham. I'll be more careful. Orissa cast a side eye at Benjamin. Why did you scold the doctor? I didn't even say it hurts, so why? Are you freaking out? He was sitting so still like a statue just a minute ago, and next, he opened his mouth to scold someone. Jerk. Didn't you yelp earlier? If it didn't hurt, then why did you do that? Benjamin stared at her intently. Orissa glared at him, realizing his words carried a double meaning. Ignoring Benjamin, she turned to the doctor and apologized. Sorry. I'm actually fine. No problem. Mr. Graham is my superior. He's only asking me to be careful, the doctor explained to her softly as he stuck the needle into Orissa. Orissa was shocked by the doctor's revelation. This is his hospital. Mr. Graham nodded. Mr. Graham is the largest shareholder. No wonder. Orissa peered at Benjamin again. Leave if you're done. Benjamin shot another glance at the doctor. The doctor quickly nodded and packed up his stuff, leaving the room swiftly. Orissa asked, Benjamin, can't you speak nicely to the doctor? Benjamin simply scoffed at her question. Is your head filled with water? Orissa was stunned for a moment before realizing he was calling her dumb. She felt anger burning inside her but she couldn't do anything about it. So she just pulled the blanket over her head and slept. She thought she couldn't sleep from the burning rage but was knocked out just a few seconds later. Benjamin continued to work for a while and saw her with a blanket over her head. When he approached, he realized she had fallen asleep. He bent down to pull the blanket from her head and pushed the hair away from her face. Then, he stared at her face for a while before he adjusted the drip and returned to the couch, resuming his work. Meanwhile, Jack had arrived at the hospital in North Stream and found Ethan. When he spotted a boy standing beside Ethan, he thought the boy was one of the kids. Oh, you're here too. Ethan, have you really found Tim? Where is he? Ethan didn't want to answer Jack for the dumb question that came out of his mouth. Tim looked up at Jack. I think he's asking about me. Come on, say something. Why aren't you telling me anything? Where is Tim? Bring me to him quickly. Jack urged Ethan hurriedly. Ethan rolled his eyes at Jack, then glanced at Tim, who was standing right beside him. He's right here. Are you blind? Jack rebuked. You don't have to scold me. Are you looking for a fight, Ethan? Chapter 466. Jack looked down at Tim again and met the boy's curious gaze. He was stunned after a closer inspection. He noticed Tim was slightly different from the kids back in Delmore. Jack dashed over and halted in front of Tim. You're Tim. Tim shrank back and pursed his lips. Not fazed by Tim's silence, Jack introduced himself friendly. Hi, Tim. I'm Jack. Why are you so dark? Ethan rolled his eyes at Jack's stupidity, then knocked his head. Stop your nonsense. Jack immediately shut his mouth and looked at Tim apologetically. I'm sorry. I didn't think things through before I spoke. Don't be angry. I'm quite dark myself. He lifted his arm and showed his dark skin to Tim. Tim simply glanced at him, then turned around to enter the ward. Confused at Tim's actions, Jack turned to Ethan. Why did he leave? His eyes widened as he assumed the worst, recalling Tim had not spoken a word ever since he arrived. Does Tim have a problem speaking? Ethan was fed up with Jack's wild imagination. What nonsense are you talking about now? He's fine. Maybe he just doesn't want to speak to an idiot like you. You. Jack's temper spiked at Ethan's jab. I think it's better if you return to Delmore. Mr. Graham asked me to stay here and care for Tim. There are many tasks there that I can't pick up, so go back and help Mr. Graham, Ethan asked. Jack was confused at Ethan's request. Why don't you head back and let me care for Tim? Ethan cast him a contemptuous look. Didn't you see how he has ignored you just a while ago? Are you sure you can take care of him if you stay? Jack pursed his lips. I hate to admit it, but Ethan is right. How did you find him? It was all thanks to Mr. Graham's sharp hearing. Otherwise, we would have lost the chance to save Tim. Luckily, Mr. Graham noticed something was off. Else, we would have lost the opportunity to find Tim. It was my fault for being careless and not paying any attention to the calls. Ethan told Jack a bit about what happened. Jack taunted, and you claim that you're a meticulous person. Aren't you careless too? Ethan scowled at him. Hurry up and go back. Jack shook his head. I haven't played with Tim yet. Ethan was struck speechless at Jack's childishness. Tim is slightly sensitive at the moment. Play with him after he returns to Yaleview. Jack blinked his eyes. Sensitive about what? Ethan decided he was done speaking to Jack at that point. Then, his phone rang. Sean had called Ethan to inform him about his arrival at the hospital with a team of medical staff and the kids. Hearing they had arrived, Ethan sent Jack down to pick them up. Jack shot him the bird, then ran down to bring them up. Ethan merely smirked at Jack's back and entered the ward. He said, "Tim, a few doctors have arrived from Delmore. They'll conduct a detailed examination on your grandma. Are they good?" Tim looked up at Ethan with gratitude shining in his eyes. That man really did send the doctors. Of course, they're all well known within the country and famous globally. Ethan's confirmation reassured Tim. "Thank you, Mr. Frank." Tim thanked. Ethan ruffled Tim's head. "You're welcome. Your dad was the one who hired these doctors, so you should thank him." Tim lowered his head, looking down at Mary, who was lying on the bed with her eyes shut. "Grandma, wake up. There are more skillful doctors here to help you." Ethan patted Tim's shoulders lightly. "Tim, there's something I have to tell you." Tim had gotten familiar with Ethan, so he was much more comfortable with him now. Ethan flashed a smile at the boy as he bent down to his eye level. "There'll be a few friends coming here with the doctors later." Tim was puzzled. "Friends? What friends?" "Ethan." Jack's voice echoed from outside and had Ethan looking over his shoulder. He saw Sean and the rest were waiting outside the room, so he hurriedly led Tim over to them. Chapter 467. Tim followed behind Ethan. When Tim saw the few adults and kids waiting outside, his attention honed in on the 5 similar-looking kids. His eyes were wide from shock. "Who are they?" Sean put on a friendly smile after catching sight of Tim. "Hi, I'm Sean. You can call me Uncle Sean." Tim's gaze was still glued to the kids. Gavin, Zachary, Oliver, Jasper, and Jesse were taken aback by Tim's appearance. "He's so dark." "Tim." Jesse drew closer to Tim with a smile and clung to his arm. Tim tried to dodge but failed. "Hi, Tim." Next, Jasper came up to Tim and clung to his other arm. "We finally get to meet you." "Hi, Tim." Oliver shouted happily. "Hi." Zachary called out. "This is the present we have prepared for you." Gavin thrust the small sailboat model he was carrying in his arms to Tim. The kids had spent some time on their way to the hospital to build it. Tim was staring dazedly at their friendly attitude. Gavin, Zachary, Oliver, Jasper, and Jesse trained their gazes at Tim without blinking, waiting for a response. "Why isn't he saying anything? Is he in shock by our friendliness?" Gavin exchanged a glance with Zachary, then brought Tim to the side. "Kids, don't scare him. Please introduce yourselves first." Ethan caught the uneasiness on Tim's face and quickly reminded the kids. Gavin smiled as he explained, "You're our biological brother. We have the same daddy and mommy. I'm Gavin Graham, the eldest." Zachary continued, "I'm Zachary York, the third." Oliver peered at Zachary, and followed through. He said, with a smile, "I'm the fourth, Oliver York." Jasper piped in, "I'm the fifth, Jasper York. And I'm the last, Jesse York." Tim was confused when he noticed the last 4 kids had the same family name while he and Gavin had a different one. "You're the second child," Gavin added, "but you might also be the eldest. Mommy still isn't sure yet. It's fine if you want to be the eldest." "What's your name?" "That's right. Brother, what's your name?" Zachary, Oliver, Jasper, and Jesse had their eyes fixed on Tim. Tim looked at the faces similar to his but slightly fairer and felt like he was dreaming. "I'm Tim," Tim softly said, seeing their expectant eyes. Jack was surprised. "I didn't hear one word from him ever since I arrived. These kids are still the best." Sean shot him a mirthful glance and continued to scan Tim. "He's just a little darker and thinner. I don't see any other problems." Sean met Ethan's eyes and asked, "Where is the old lady?" "She's inside." Ethan had Jack watch the children and led Sean and the doctors into the ward. On their way to the hospital, Sean and the medical staff had discussed Mary's condition. When they saw Mary, they examined her pallor in detail. Ethan called the doctor from the hospital and briefly introduced both sides. Dr. Bailey. Mary's attending doctor was excited, for he didn't expect to meet the famous Dr. Bailey. Sean nodded with acknowledgement and started some small talk before delving into Mary's condition. Tim saw all the doctors had gone inside and wanted to join too. Grandma. Gavin and the rest followed him inside. Tim, don't worry, your grandma will get better. Uncle Sean is an amazing doctor, Gavin assured him. Zachary nodded decisively. Uncle Sean even brought a few doctors with him. They will come up with the best treatment plan for her no matter how dire she is. Tim looked at them and said, "Thank you." Chapter 468. Tim dashed into the ward and asked Sean, "Doctor, will my grandma get better?" Sean caressed Tim's head and tried to ease the boy's anxiousness. "She will." Tim gazed at him for a moment. Then, he turned to the others before looking down. "You can tell me the truth, mister. It's okay," he said softly. "Will my grandma never wake up again?" Sean's chest tightened at the boy's words. He felt so much pity for him. "She'll wake up," said Gavin as he took Tim's hand. "Don't you worry," added Zachary while putting an arm around the boy. "Your grandma hasn't even gotten a checkup yet, so there's nothing Uncle Sean can say for now. Don't be sad, okay? Uncle Sean will make sure she gets better." Oliver, Jasper, and Jesse came over to comfort Tim. The latter was so touched that his nose stung. Sean knelt in front of him and stroked his head again. "Don't think too much about it. Your grandma's in a bit of a complicated situation now. We're going to have to run some tests. I'll talk to you once we find out what her illness is, okay?" Tim blinked. His eyes were filled with concern. "Your grandma's still unconscious because of the drip, but she'll wake up." As he explained, Mary let out a mutter. Tim, Grandma." The boy's eyes lit up as he rushed over to the bed and held Mary's hand. Mary felt much better and assured after seeing him. Then, she glanced around the room and froze upon spotting a few doctors as well as some strangers. "What, am I about to die?" Sean and the other doctors exchanged glances before he walked up to her. "I'm Sean Bailey. Benjamin Graham told me to tend to you. I just arrived to give you a checkup. Don't put too much thought into all this. All you have to do is follow the treatment." Mary remained perplexed. "Benjamin Graham, who's that?" Ethan stepped forward. "He's my boss. You've met him." "You again." Mary's expression took a turn as she swiftly grabbed Tim's hand, afraid that he would be taken away. "Don't get us wrong, ma'am. We're not bad guys," Ethan explained right away. "You're still unwell, so it's best that you stay here and receive treatment. Dr. Bailey is well known in the medical field. Just let him know where it hurts, and he'll do whatever he can to treat you." "He's not a bad guy, Grandma." Tim hurriedly chimed in. Mary stared at them in confusion. "Who are you guys, then?" Ethan observed her expression. "You've just woken up. You should eat something for now. I'll explain everything later." "Grandma." Ethan went to get some oatmeal porridge that he had prepared earlier. "Give her some water before that. She just woke up," reminded Sean before he began to examine Mary. "Is my grandma okay?" Tim stared at him worriedly. "She's fine," answered Sean. Gavin walked over with a glass of warm water. "Here, have some water." Mary's eyes widened as soon as she saw him. "You." She then turned to Tim. Upon realizing that he was still there, she glanced at Gavin again before finally confirming that they were two different boys. They both look so much alike. Could it be? "Hi, Grandma. My name's Gavin Graham. Nice to meet you." Gavin politely introduced himself to Mary. "Hello," the old woman replied in a daze. Then, she turned to Tim and whispered, "What's going on? This boy looks so much like Tim. Could they be his family?" With pursed lips, Tim took the glass of water from Gavin and gave it to Mary. "Drink up, Grandma. We'll explain everything soon." "Thank you." Mary nodded and sat up. Sean helped raise the bed before signaling the other doctors to head outside and discuss Mary's condition. Chapter 469. As Ethan returned with the oatmeal porridge, the children swiftly propped up the mini table by the bed. It was now that Mary realized there were 4 other children in here, 3 of whom looked especially similar to each other. These children," she exclaimed. As she turned to Ethan, the latter smiled. "They're my boss's children. And yes, They're sextuplets. Realization dawned on Mary as she gazed at Tim. These are all Tim's family members. They've finally come for him. Could it have been a mistake when Tim was abandoned back then? Noticing the look on Mary's face, Ethan knew what she was thinking and saw no need to explain any further. Have some food, ma'am. Eat up, Grandma. I've already eaten. Tim blew on the oatmeal porridge, climbed onto the bed, and began to feed Mary. Delighted, the old woman strokes his head lovingly. Were you worried about me? I was so scared. I'm just glad you're awake now, Grandma. The boy beamed at her. Mary's heart ached at the sight. He must have felt so helpless while I was unconscious. Then, she felt a little more relieved as she gazed at the other 5 children. At least they'll be with him when I'm no longer around. He won't feel helpless ever again. Despite feeling reluctant, Mary was still glad that the boy had found his family while she was still alive. I'm perfectly fine, my child, she assured, suppressing the pain in her heart. Tim gazed at her, well aware that she was only trying to console him. She wouldn't have coughed blood if she were truly fine. Have some oatmeal porridge and get some rest, Grandma. Dr. Bailey said he'll be giving you a full body checkup. Okay, Mary nodded. Give that to me. I can feed myself. No, Grandma, your hand is in pain, doesn't it? Let me feed you, Tim insisted while continuing to feed her the exact same way she used to feed him. Ethan, Gavin, and the 5 children felt troubled as they watched the sight before them. They could tell how much Tim cared for Mary. The boy would surely be devastated if anything were to happen to her. Zachary walked to a corner and whipped out his phone to switch it on, only to learn that he had a missed call from Arissa. He then glanced at Tim before exiting the ward to return Arissa's call. The woman happened to be asleep, and Benjamin grabbed her phone as soon as he heard it ring. He answered the call upon realizing that it was Zachary. Hello. Zachary froze when he heard Benjamin's voice. Mr. Graham. Yeah, where's my mommy? She's sleeping. What's up? Then, the man guessed that the children had reached the hospital. You've arrived. Yeah, I just called to tell Mommy that I've met Tim, said Zachary as he took a peek into the ward. Jasper came out when he saw his brother on the phone. Who is it? He whispered. It's Mr. Graham. How's Tim? Is he okay? Benjamin asked, concerned. He was really sad and worried about his grandma, but he's feeling a little better now. He's feeding her some oatmeal porridge now. An image of the tiny, frail-looking boy flashed in Benjamin's mind as he heard Zachary's report. He wasn't sure if Sean could treat Mary either. What did Uncle Sean say? He didn't say much. He only said he'd have to give Tim's grandma a checkup first. Benjamin's eyes gleamed. Okay, I understand. Keep your brother company, and don't be loud while you're there. Got it. Got it. Zachary said goodbye before hanging up and turning to Jasper. Mommy's asleep. The latter stared at Zachary for a while before speaking. Chapter 470. Hey, Zachary, don't you think it's weird? Why didn't Mommy come to see Tim? If Mommy knew he has been found, wouldn't she come over right away to see him? Why isn't she here when the rest of us are? Zachary read his thoughts and felt the same. Then, his brows knitted. Could something have happened to Mommy? Jasper's face fell. Did she fall sick? Who fell sick? Oliver came out just in time to hear what Jasper had said. In an instant, Gavin and Jesse heard it as well, and they all looked over. Tim turned around too. Who has fallen sick? Asked Ethan as he walked toward the 2 children. Zachary and Jasper gave him a glance, signaling him to one side. Tell us the truth, Mr. Frank. Did our mommy fall sick? She hadn't contacted them ever since she headed out this morning. Ethan froze briefly as he thought about how Benjamin had rushed back because of Arissa. Then, he gazed at the children. They obviously don't know what happened to her, but wouldn't they worry if I told them? Didn't you come over with Uncle Sean? You can ask him. Sean was the doctor in charge. He was also the one who tended to Arissa whenever she fell sick. The boys frowned. He didn't tell us anything, Gavin said coldly while walking out of the ward. Then, he began heading toward the doctor's office. Zachary quickly tagged along. Soon, Jasper, Oliver, and Jesse did the same. Ethan brushed his nose and instructed the bodyguards to follow them. Has Jack left? he asked upon noticing that Jack wasn't around. I'm not sure. He didn't tell us anything. With that, Ethan merely waved his hand, signaling the guards to follow the children. Tim could tell that the other children were worried about someone having fallen sick, but he couldn't understand why Ethan was hiding the truth from them. Is it because he doesn't want them to worry? The boy had a bad feeling. I wonder what happened to her. Could it be something serious? Why else would that man hurry back? A look of worry formed on Tim's face. Mary glanced at him before calling out to Ethan. Excuse me, young man. Ethan turned around to see the old woman beckoning him over. What is it, ma'am? He asked, walking toward her. Who has fallen sick? Ethan gazed at the old woman before turning to the boy, his eyes flashing with warmth at the sight of how worried Tim looked. It looks like he does care. It's Mrs. Graham. She's the children's mother. Mary stilled for a moment. Is he talking about Tim's biological mother? Is it serious? She couldn't help but furrow her brows in concern. No, she collapsed from shock a while ago, but the doctor says she's fine now. Mary nodded. Shock. From what? Ethan glanced at them and sighed. It happened when she was looking for her child, he explained. She thought something horrible had happened to him, so her nerves got the better of her. Mary looked at the boy next to her. Was she looking for Tim? Ethan nodded. It wasn't exactly a bad thing to let the boy know that Arissa had fallen sick looking for him. Tim lowered his head and bit his lip. She fell sick looking for me. Didn't they abandon me? Why did they come looking for me again? Tim couldn't get these questions out of his head. Furthermore, the thought of the 5 children, including Gavin, all being together made him feel more miserable. It was as if he was the only one who had been deserted. Is it because I'm not good enough?